Hello and welcome to the podcast of our church here at St. John's German Lutheran Parish in Springvale. Today, our English edition.
We are the German Lutheran Church in Southeast Melbourne, a bilingual German and English congregation, and we wish you a great day and a blessed week.
And our topic today is aged care. We are looking forward to talk with Chrissy about aged care and the challenges at the moment through the COVID-19 restrictions. Please remember, listeners, this is as always a personal view. St. John's is neutral to all of our topics.
And we also have an inspirational word from the Bible to encourage, to strengthen, to motivate and comfort you, to lift you up and sustain you in the coming hours and days. We welcome Chrissy. Great to have you again on board. Chrissy is one of our board members here at St. John's. And she started to work in an aged care facility just a couple of months ago after finishing her training and studies. So we are interested to talk about this topic today, especially because the aged care sector is one sector that's had to really change their daily routine and how they offer care during this time of the pandemic.
That's right. And you may remember, Chrissy, we had already here before on our podcast. So again, welcome, Chrissy. Nice to have you here. So
Thank you very much.
Please, before we start, can you tell us why you joined the aged care sector?
Well, when I moved 2 years ago to Gippsland, I tried to get a job in hospitality, and I got all my certificates you need for that, for food handling. I did a barista course. I did even alcohol serving, and even though I don't really like it, but gambling license. And I was just simply too old to get a job in that field. People preferred younger people. So I went from, very well-established big places, I won't name them, to small cafes or bakeries, but nothing came out of it. Then going on to Centrelink for the first time in my Australian life was another challenge in its own. And having to apply for jobs, even though you knew from the start you wouldn't get the job for whatever reason, I stumbled over some ads, and they were referring to get a certificate in aged care. And I thought, okay, that's something I should investigate a little bit more, considering that I do help out occasionally when I can with the seniors group with Herta, and I like that. So so I looked into it, and before I knew it, I was enrolled in school and did 6 months of school in a certificate for an aged care. Plus, when others went on school holidays, I kept going back to school because I just wanted to do more.
Yes.
So I also gained a certificate for in lifestyle and health, which I can use to work in aged care itself. After I finished the school, I did my placement, which was a combined of 240 hours of work. And that took me also a few weeks to complete. But people there were so kind. Family members of residents and other carers put their name up and went to the care managers and said, "You better employ that girl. She's really good."
Oh, that's great. Chrissy, 240 hours, you said.
Yep.
You have to do that before you can apply for a job in aged care, or?
Yeah, this is a part two. So first you do your schooling, your theory. I think we had 18 assessments of various topics. You had to do also a manual handling case. You had to get your police check. You had to do a first aid course. You had to do a CPR course. All of that before you even set foot in the facility.
Mm-hmm.
And 240 hours was combined for both certificates, unpaid work, and you had to work with another carer. So pretty much like a shadow worker. You work with one together, and you did everything from day one what everyone else was doing. If you weren't sure, I would say, oh, I'm not comfortable doing this, or can you show me how you do that? Because they are things which are slightly done differently than how you learn it at school. Theory is always one thing, but practical part is
different, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I just finished my last placement day and Victoria went into a lockdown. But because of the references I had from within the facility, I had an interview which went for like 15 minutes, and within a week I was working at the same facility. Yeah.
Perfect.
So you said that, right, your last days after finishing your placement, Victoria went into lockdown. That's an experience. We at St. John's have an affiliation with Martin Luther homes, and we are aware and mindful about their situation. And how did you experience this time of lockdown? How did it change from the routines you had before? And what was, in your view, probably the most challenging one?
The first thing which was quite daunting was the limitation suddenly of who was able to access the facility at any time during the day, having to ring the doorbell pretty much if you wanted to come in, if you didn't have a swipe code, you know, because the doors were suddenly locked. So family members, friends of people who wanted to see a resident couldn't just come in anymore. They had to make an appointment. And it was everywhere the same, that the times of visiting times were limited. I believe it was 45 minutes per day per resident. Some resident would have visitors every day, and suddenly people couldn't come in anymore when they wanted to see them or needed to see them. So our lifestyle team, they're terrific people, came up with the initiative and did video calls and on their iPads and window visits as well. So you would make a booking through our lifestyle team, but you were able then also to see your loved one on the other side of the glass, and you speak through a telephone. So you can still see them and you can touch the glass and blow kisses, and you know, so it's quite a different way of visiting someone. But this is how it went into stage 4 then. So from being allowed 45 minutes a day to have a visitor and then not physically touching them, it would have been quite traumatic in a way for anyone, you know, because that is what we want. We want to touch someone's hand. We want to touch someone's face and give them a hug. And suddenly you're not allowed to, you know. So people having to sanitize their hands when they come in, having to answer a lot of questions. Have you been in touch with anyone who's been overseas in the last 14 days? Have you been in quarantine? Have you been tested? It's very intimidating too, you know, and having to provide a certificate that you have had your flu shot as well. So it's very personal, very personal.
Isn't it hard? As I spoke, not in aged care, but I spoke with a friend last week, and unfortunately her house burned down. And she thankfully and her family went out. But she said, Tim, you know, I couldn't stop. I had to hug my mom, friends and family. I couldn't resist. I needed that so much. I think really, really hard in situations like that, and especially in aged care, or you have dementia and you don't even remember that you had a visitor already on the day, and you think, what did I do wrong? Why I'm sitting alone here?
Yes, people asking that question, and we try to not talk about it too much about this COVID-19. I think it would upset some people more, even because they don't watch the news all the time, but we hear it. We get, you know, instructions, you know, they change. We had instructions change from one day to another. You know, when we had the stage 4 restrictions come in and stage 3 in the regional areas. So you try to divert and come up with different questions. And yes, it's not the same, you know, trying to hug someone with gloves, but having a glove on and the mask on now and the face shield, it's not simple. It's not simple. But yeah, we'll try to divert and see if we can have a discussion about something else, which is a bit more lighter.
Okay.
You know? Yeah.
And Chrissy, you said theory and practice. I think this is everybody, it's completely different. Yeah, what you learn in theory and what you're doing in practice in the end. And now you're working already a couple of months and have probably enough practice to tell us a little bit and where you wish to change something in aged care facilities and why, and to have a better or different understanding of people needs. Is there something?
I mean, we all see the reports in the media, what went wrong, how things were handled. For whatever reason, people didn't understand how they have to apply their PPEs, you know, meaning how to put on a gown, and that's not a ballroom gown, that's the blue plastic or yellow plastic gown, you know. If you have someone in quarantine or isolation, as we call it, the new word for this year, ISO, I believe. And I could see that the Royal Commission has to look further into it. That's my personal view. To say that a carer can look after, I'm just picking a figure. This is not reality. I'm just saying could look after 6 people, 6 residents on their shift. It might not be as clear cut to look after 6 residents because it really depends on the level of care you have to provide. Because we have people who are quite capable of showering themselves, dressing themselves, walking down to the dining room, going to activities. For them, it's more a way of life. They can't look after themselves in a house anymore, do the cleaning, the shopping, the gardening, all these type of things. But then you have people who need an assistant, who have a little walker, and they need to be assisted to go from the bed to the toilet, to go and participate in an activity. But we also have people which need 2, or in some cases 3 carers, because they can't do much anymore. And maybe because of their disability, they do need a lot of care. So you can't just say one carer can look after 6 residents. It really depends on how many people need to attend to care for one person. And that is what's important here. And that needs to be addressed. I think that's the most important part. And of course, that we also get to spend more time with the individual resident. They love chatting to us. We love chatting with them. And it's the small things which matter, the really small things. It might be just getting them the local paper or giving them a little hand massage, combing their hair, or putting a video on they all like, having a little boogie when they play music. And that's really a highlight for people. You don't think that it would affect them that much, but it does.
Yeah, so definitely the ratio between carers and the residents as a area to improve or to think about what's the best solution. I think for everyone, it's important to remember that, and as you described it, residential aged care is not a hospital. If you think about residential aged care along that lines, that's wrong. It's the role of a residential aged care, it's like you described, for someone to care for who is not able to care for themselves entirely anymore, and that might imply more help on one end, or just providing the facility and interesting activities on the other hand. So I think that's important to remember, because aged cares do not have the role to, isn't it, to provide the whole care a hospital would provide. So there are two different institutions with two different roles. Of course, in some ways, residential aged care takes on these responsibilities until up to a certain level that they can provide. But what do you think? And well, looking forward to the roadmap of opening up Victoria, what are the next steps in your field, in the aged care? Where do you see how do you see aged care opening up in the next weeks? How will that happen? Do you have information there about that?
Well, here in regional Victoria, as of today, residents are allowed to have personal visitors again. We're down to, again, one level, and which means 45 minutes a day per visitor, which I'm really, really happy about, because I would go bonkers, really. I would go bonkers if I would have to stay inside without seeing anyone. And I totally feel it. So that's one good thing for the regional area of Victoria already. And for the future, well, I just hope people understand it a bit more and be open to what needs to change. But it's not in our hand, it's in the hands of our politicians or our health ministers, and they have to address it. You know, they can't just keep swiping it off the plate. I think this COVID-19 highlighted issues within the aged care sector more than ever before. And it's been presented, it's been shown. It can't be ignored anymore. And we shouldn't, because we have to look after our residents. We have to look after our elder. Simple as that.
I think we are.
One day it's us.
Yes.
And Chrissy, where do you see yourself in 1 year, in 5 years, in professionally?
Well, in 5 years, I hope I'm retired from the workforce, because I'm almost old enough then to move into an aged care facility myself.
Don't say that.
I might not look it, I might not act like it, but the paperwork says so. I hope I learn a bit more over the next few years, because I really, really love what I'm doing. I have been asked many times, how do you do it? How can you do this? And the answer is, I don't know, I just do. So yeah, learning more is one thing. Participating in more studies, yes. I'm looking into also to learn a bit more about dementia, which I deal with at work as well at times. And yeah, it's just take one day at the time, enjoy the work, help people. And once I'm retired officially from the workforce, I hope I continue to provide help and guidance to our elders from the church. I still keep volunteering as long as I can.
Beautiful. We need more people of you, you know, they're loving a job and loving what they're doing, especially in aged care. It's such an important part of it. Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank
Peter,
you.
You have another question?
Yes, I would like to thank you, Chrissy, and also all our frontline workers in aged care especially, but or in care in general. It was for all of us it is a very challenging time going through this crisis, but especially for everyone who is working in this care sector, it was a much harder and much more challenging period than we could have ever thought it will be at the beginning of 2020. So from our behalf, just a huge thank you. Thank you. And a hug, a virtual hug.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Peter, which
Yes.
devotion do you have today for us?
Well, it's one that also thinks about care and caring. And it's just a passage from the Bible. I didn't want to talk too much about it, but read us the passage. It's a great story that in which Jesus illustrates and talks about this topic. It's from Luke in chapter 10. And he has a conversation, and we listen to it. So it starts, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "Well, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to walk by the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expenses you may have." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? Well, the expert replied, "The one who had mercy on him, of course." And Jesus told him, "Yes, go and do likewise." Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Peter. As always, thank you for listening and sharing. Have a wonderful week with your family, friends, and loved ones. And we look forward to welcoming you again next time in English with elders of the church to talk about the upcoming annual general meeting. Before we go, do you have a topic or you want to join us? Please get in contact with us. We are looking forward to getting your help and input. Bye-bye. Take care till then.